Hi, thanks for listening to the Monthly Social here on YouTube. If you haven't already, please click the subscribe button. It would mean the world to us. All right, hope you enjoy the rest of the show. Take care. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Monthly Social Self-Help Spotlight. I'm your host, Guido Perino, bringing you into our self-help segment and a focus on physical health with Dr. Jonathan Su, who's going to talk about his 6-minute knee pain cure, among other health tips. Thank you for being here, Dr. Su. Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Good to hear that you're doing great. Sometimes you ask people, or how are you doing? And I'm not sure, and they don't really know what to answer. So great is a great place to start. Look, I understand that you're from the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay, for those who might not reference it, I guess, as the Bay. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about your typical San Fran day? When it comes to maybe routines, traffic, things we might all do in our daily lives.
Yeah, sure. So I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old boys. So I get up pretty early to get some personal time to do some work, to exercise. So I get up pretty much about 5 o'clock every morning these days.
Uh-huh.
And then after that, I get my boys up. We get them ready for school. My wife drops them off at school, and I see patients all day until I get home around 5 or 6 p.m. in the afternoon, in the evening. And then, it's dinner time, uh, playing ball with the boys, and then
Yeah.
putting them to sleep. And then I do some more work after that.
So almost a pretty routine family day that we might all, be accustomed to if we've got kids and have to do our work and take care of the family, right? Yeah,
Yeah, sounds like it.
yeah,
Yeah, pretty much.
yeah, right on. Well, good to know you're among the normal, right? Sometimes we hear doctor and we think, oh, geez, I wonder what a doctor does during the day that we don't do or whatever, right? But same family life, very similar. That's good to hear. Look, I started addressing you here as Dr. Sue. Perhaps share with everyone your areas of expertise as a doctor that, as I ask you questions today, that you might reference.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a physical therapist by trade. I have a doctoral degree in physical therapy. I've been a physical therapist for about 15 years. I'm also a yoga therapist, certified yoga therapist, strength and strength and conditioning specialist. And what I do is I help people move and feel better.
Sounds like I could use some of that move and feel better because I sit at a desk all day and it probably wreaks havoc on everything in the system, right, Dr. Sue?
It sure does. It's
Yeah.
interesting because when we sit for a long time, what happens is our metabolism shuts down after about 20 or 30 minutes, and we start getting high blood sugar levels, high blood cholesterol levels. And so yes, prolonged sitting is a problem, is a big problem these days.
Yeah, and then if we add in the traffic on top of that, it gets even worse, right? If we're traveling to an office. Um, Look, I'm going to ask you a question about the U.S. Army because you're a U.S. Army officer. How much of your work in that role, where you oversaw injury prevention, rehabilitation, performance optimization, how much does that all play into your work on the health books that you've been able to pen to date?
Yeah, sure. That's a huge part of everything. I got started after graduating from physical therapy school. I actually was trained by the U.S. Army. A lot of people don't know that the physical therapy actually started in the U.S. military. After World War I, we had a lot of injured soldiers, and we didn't know what to do with them. So we started the first program in the United States back in in the early 1900s. And so I had the honor of attending that school, and as soon as I graduated, I was embedded with a infantry brigade out in Hawaii, of all places, and I was responsible for 4,500 soldiers. So yes, I was responsible for injury prevention, rehabilitation, performance optimization, and I saw literally like over 100 patients a week. I was by myself. I had no resources, no staff, and so I had to figure out really quickly how to get people better. And that is a huge part of what I do today is, how do we cut right down to what the person needs the most to help
Well,
them recover?
it sounds like there's a psychological component too to all of that as well as you're dealing with people, eh?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. So later on in my career, I went and got a master's degree in counseling psychology because of my experiences in the army, seeing these people with PTSD, and they showed up with pain issues that just didn't make any sense. So I started realizing that, hey, pain is also there's a psychological component, there's a neurological component, and there's a physical component. And we really got to address all three if we really want to help people fully recover.
You mentioned something about the U.S. Army training you in the field. How does that like I'm up here in Canada. How does that work? Are you in the Army and they send you to a school, or is that like an Army based school?
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of different routes for healthcare professionals in the Army, but for physical therapy specifically, it's actually an Army school.
Oh,
So what happens is, back when I was applying, 20 years ago, they accepted about 24 people nationwide. And so it's a highly selective program. And once you're selected, you get commissioned as an Army officer. You're a second lieutenant. You go through the basic officer leadership course. And after you graduate that, you're sitting in the classroom on an Army base with your uniform on, learning physical therapy for 3 years, getting your doctoral degree. And
wow.
then it's pretty amazing. And then once you graduate, you start serving the soldiers around you.
Now, did you spend, sorry for asking all of these questions that are Army based, it's just so intriguing all of a sudden. Did you serve stateside or did you have to get deployed somewhere?
So I was as soon as I graduated, I got very lucky. I got stationed in what I believe was one of the best places in the world, Hawaii. So I was embedded with the 25th Infantry Division out at Schofield Barracks. I spent 4 years out there, and it just so happened that at that time, the units out in Hawaii weren't deploying to combat zones. So I spent most of my time playing in the dirt out in Hawaii and different training locations around the
Yeah.
U.S. So I didn't actually get to deploy with the unit.
So it was the soldiers coming back and you were dealing with those folks as well, with those soldiers?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what would happen is we would have a clinic when we're in garrison or when we weren't like training or deployed. And then when the unit would go on training missions, we would actually go out with the soldiers. So sometimes we would spend
Wow.
10 days at a time out in the field with them, sleeping in tents or, just on the ground somewhere or on the back of a Humvee. And we would actually treat soldiers out there with no equipment. And that's a very
Wow.
interesting experience as a healthcare professional, because you're used to seeing healthcare professionals in the clinic, but in the military, there was no clinic. Your clinic is right here on the dirt ground. And so you learn a lot. You figure out, like, hey, I don't actually need a lot of equipment. I just need knowledge and experience to be able to help people get better.
Incredible. Talk about having to be resourceful. So some of that resourcefulness, you've put together a series of books, all of which start with the idea that we can accomplish something in 6 minutes. Before we get into the books themselves, where does the idea or concept of 6 minutes come from? Why six? Why not four, 8, 30? How do we land on six?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think what happened was as I was seeing all these patients in the army, like I said, I was the only guy out there, only physical therapist for 4,500 soldiers. And anytime someone got a physical injury, musculoskeletal injury, the doctors would send them to me. And by the way, there were like 12 doctors out there and one of me, 12 physicians and one of me. So I was just bombarded. And what I essentially figured out was that if I just cut down the treatments just to the most essentials, essential interventions, that we could get people better in about 6 minutes. And if you think about it, like if you go and exercise at the gym and you're having chest day, right? You might have two exercises, maybe three exercises for the chest at most. And if you think about the amount of time you're actually putting that muscle under resistance, right? Like 3 sets of 10, how long does it take to accomplish a set? Like maybe 30 seconds. So 6 minutes is actually ideal if you're really trying to drill down to the problem. Because see, what I believe is that if we're trying to solve a problem, we're going to focus on one problem at a time. I'm not going to try to solve three or four problems, because what happens is, you have longer treatments and all of a sudden the people, they're not motivated to do it anymore. They see it as a burden. And so I figured that with 6 minutes, not only can we help really drill down into a problem, help people solve these problems, but it keeps them motivated and they see a change. And then that keeps them going with the program because the body takes time to change, right? So things are going to, take a few weeks to really, make a massive change in direction. So we got to keep someone motivated. So 6 minutes was perfect.
See, when you put it that way, I think to myself that psychological barrier, if I'm at the gym and I'm thinking to myself at the gym, yeah, if I go and do leg day, and you're right, I break it down. How much time am I really spending doing those sets? 30 to 45 seconds per set. You take your recovery period. 6 minutes doesn't seem that hard, right? And it doesn't, you go, oh, it's not such a big thing, not a big hill that I have to climb. All right, let's talk about your latest book, 6 Minute Knee Pain Cure. Why was now the right time to address knee pain specifically?
Well, I guess for me, I suffered a severe knee injury when I was 15 years old, and I'm in my mid 40s right now. I essentially tore every single ligament in my knee. I had a 200-pound linebacker crash into my knee. It bent my knee so badly that my ankle pretty much touched my ear. And I was told by the orthopedic surgeon that I would never be able to be active in my life. By the time I was in my 30s, they said I would need a knee replacement. And so I lived for nearly 30 years of my life, thinking that, I'm not going to be able to be active anymore. And that was a big deal for me because, for me, I need to be active for me to stay mentally well. Some of us, we got to have physical activity to be
Yeah.
mentally healthy, and that's me. Um, so, that's how I got into the field of physical therapy. And I got into the field because I wanted to solve this problem. I went to other therapists. I went to, acupuncturists, massage therapists, chiropractors, physicians, you name it. And none of them really suffered the type of injury I had. So they were giving me solutions that were, based off of a textbook, what they learned, not something that most of them experienced. And so I realized that for me to figure out this problem, I needed to go into the field of physical therapy, become a physical therapist, explore, anything that I could get my hands on, like yoga therapy and strength and training, strength and, conditioning, and just try to figure this out. And now that I'm in my mid 40s, I walk around now with zero pain. The prediction that the orthopedic surgeon gave me about needing a knee replacement, having pain for the rest of my life wasn't true. And I figured this was a good time to write this book because, hey, I'm sure there's other people out there who are told a lot of things, inaccurate prognoses by their doctors,
Hmm.
and they're sitting there thinking, "Oh my goodness, I'm screwed." And really, I don't think most people are in that boat.
Did you feel like when you were visiting those doctors, they weren't listening to what you were saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's gotten worse too these days. I don't know when the last time you went to see a healthcare professional,
Mm.
but yeah, absolutely. I didn't feel like they were really, trying to give me the real solution. They were trying to give me a cookie cutter solution. They're trying to give me something that they could easily give, 100 other people. And so I didn't feel like they really understood what I was going through, and hence, they wouldn't be able to solve my problem. And
Yeah.
so that's what drives me today as a healthcare practitioner is being able to really listen to a patient and really getting to the root cause of their issue. And that's why 6 minutes is all you really needed. If someone understands your problem, they could give you the actual solution, and it shouldn't take a long time to start noticing changes.
You are the epitome of the ultimate self-help because you're working with doctors, they're not listening, and you go, you know what? I'm gonna help myself and I'm gonna go and learn about this. I'm gonna apply some of the knowledge that I have and I'm gonna come out with a solution. And you end up coming out with the solution that you're sharing with us today. I think it's really intriguing. And the reason I asked, did the doctors not listen to you? Because we seem to be in a place where the not everybody has a family doctor and getting access to a doctor and doctors, the one thing about the idea of only 6 minutes is that doctors seem to process patients very quickly and they do apply the textbook, right? Here it is. Yeah, just go do this. Take this pill, take this medication, take this painkiller, right? As opposed to what is your unique situation? Let me see if there's something else we can apply here. And that doesn't seem to happen often. Earlier, I said to you, and you gave to us your daily routine, and I talked about traffic and sitting, and you kind of alluded to a little bit, but and I'm thinking San Francisco. I'm here just north of Toronto in Canada, heavy traffic. How much does our common daily routines impact general knee pain? We talked about sitting here in the office, sitting in traffic, that running to get the train or the bus, or how much happens in our daily lives that we don't even think about that is impacting our knees that maybe we should do some things differently.
That's a great question. I think more than most people realize. And knee pain is actually the number two most common pain that we have. And it's very interesting because you would not expect that your normal day-to-day activities can cause knee pain, but it can over time. And so what happens is, for example, you're sitting in traffic all day, right? And for let's say an hour or two during the day, and now you're sitting there with your knees bent in this like low seat. Um, and that's putting stress on your knee. And if you're there for, hours, you might notice that your knee gets kind of stiff and tight. Even when you're like, simple things like such as walking and running, what a lot of people don't realize is that our bodies need a maintenance routine, a maintenance program, kind of like a tune-up, right? You drive your car, and then after a certain amount of miles, you take your car to the shop and you get a tune-up, you get a tire rotation. Our bodies need the same thing. You can't just sit there and run and walk your whole life and not expect to have some misalignments that can cause discomfort in your knee at some point. And so, what I typically find with a lot of my patients, especially the ones who are 40 plus, is that their doctors will be like, hey, you need to start moving more. You need to start walking more. And the patient goes, okay, great. I'm going to go do that. They start walking. About a week or two into it, they start noticing knee pain. And now they go back to the doctor, and the doctor's like, well, here's an injection, here's a pill, keep walking. And it's not the root cause of, that's not the solution to their problem. And this is such a weird thing that we go through this. Um, and I think the bottom line is that yes, there are a ton of things that cause knee pain. Simple walking, running, stairs, sitting in a car for too long, sitting in a seat for too long. And what we need is a maintenance program. And that's what's missing in our lives.
So when you say the word knee pain, and I wanna kind of box it in for folks. It might mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And you started coming around defining a little bit there in your last answer. Are we talking, and does the book address bone, muscle, tendons? What makes up all the above knee pain? Are we, when we talk about maintenance, are those different?
That's a good question. And I actually co-authored 2 editions of a textbook on diagnosing these issues. It's called Netter's Orthopedic Clinical Examination. And what I learned after co-authoring these 2 books was that I got really good at diagnosing knee pain and any sort of pain that musculoskeletal issue that shows up, but not my patients didn't get any better from that understanding.
Mm.
And so what that taught me was that there's some limitations to the way we approach modern you know uh, diagnosing and assessment of pain. And and I think what's missing is that the research out there doesn't really capture everything in detail. And so a lot of the ailments get slipped through the cracks. That's why what happens is when you go to a doctor, they'll pigeonhole you. They'll say, oh, x-ray shows arthritis, and so we got to give you an injection to prevent, the, inflammation from bothering you. And who knows, is there even inflammation happening? So your question is essentially, what's causing this pain? Is it bone? Is it muscle? Is it tendon? Is it ligament? And, barring anything serious that requires an ER visit, what I found the more I've been doing this is that it doesn't really matter. What matters is, can we change it? And if I start giving you some things to do, is that going to help you? If it does and it solves the problem, who really cares what's causing the pain? Especially if it's not a medical emergency, if that makes sense.
So the treatment is not dependent on the type of pain, it's situational.
The treatment is more, because for example, like you could go to a doctor and they could do an x-ray of your knee,
Yeah.
right? And they say, oh, you have arthritis. But the problem is that the x-ray can't identify pain. And they've also done studies where they've taken 100 people and they with a lot of back pain, and they'll give them MRIs and CT scans and and x-rays, and they'll show, oh my goodness, like half these people have a whole bunch of things that are messed up and half of them have nothing that's going on. And then they'll take another group of people with no pain and they'll do these same, diagnostic imaging studies, and they'll find that half of them have nothing going on, everything looks clean and
Yeah.
clear, and half of them will have a whole bunch of crazy stuff going on, like why aren't you in the ER right now? And so what we're starting to find is that, you know, when we use these type of advanced studies like imaging studies, it doesn't really it's hard to identify pain with them unless you had an acute injury, unless something just happened. We could say, hey, I fell or I got in a car accident. Those in those situations, absolutely. We gotta we gotta do those studies, imaging
Yeah.
studies, figure out what's going on. But if you're just all of a sudden like having pain and there was no serious injury, we we really can't figure out what's causing the pain from um, studies like that.
So, Dr. Su, who are the people who are sorry, who are the typical people experiencing knee pain? Have you been, based on what I'm hearing, have you been able to identify patterns based on occupation, routines, backgrounds? Like my background is Italian. Am I more prone to knee pains because of my background? Like, do you have any those types of insights from your experiences?
Well, definitely, a person's natural constitution plays a role, right? So some people are just, their body has, heals much quicker than other people. They have, denser bones and muscles. So, um, so there are these constitutional genetic differences and,
Yeah.
activity levels. But what I noticed is that with knee pain, um, anyone can have knee pain. When in the army, knee pain was the number one issue I treated, and these were young soldiers who were like 18 to 20 years old. Um, when nowadays I treat more older adults, 60 plus, and there's a ton of knee pain. Um, and so knee pain it spans the spectrum, and so you could have knee pain because you're a young athlete and you overwork things because you know you don't realize that there's maintenance work that needs to be done that can put that threshold of pain higher, right? So you can work more before you have pain, or you don't have like the right form, or you're overloading yourself with too much weight. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have people who just aren't as active, and now they don't have the muscle mass to really support their bodies against gravity.
Right.
Um, and then what everyone tends to have a little bit of, unless you specifically work on it, are these little minor imbalances in the body. For example, you twist your ankle in ninth grade, and guess what? Now you have a slight imbalance in your body that follows you, and that gets worse over time unless you specifically address this imbalance. And that might come up and bite you in the butt when you're 50 now, right? And now now you need a knee replacement because you don't know that you've been wearing that knee, that side of the body, for all these years, for 30, 40 years. And then now you need a knee replacement. And I think a lot of these things can be prevented. I've had this knee injury for 30 years. I have still a missing ligament. And I suffered pain for decades. And today I have no pain. And it's because I'm realizing, oh, there's this thing we got to do to maintain our bodies. We have to tune up our bodies. And as soon as I do that type of work, I have no pain. Once I stop for 2 weeks, I start having pain.
So there's a pain management element to it. And you know what? Thank you for sharing your personal experience in this so that people can kind of relate to what you went through and for the duration. And just that whole idea, the imbalance, right? You mentioned, hey, it could be my ankle and it manifests itself in the knee. So maybe the knee pain is happening, but understanding where the knee pain is maybe coming from or some other thing. Um, as you're doing that and as you're assessing and trying to figure out what to do, you have something called an acid test when it comes to knee pain. How did the test come to be, and why is that an important tool for you now? How does that work?
Yeah. So it's very interesting, during the gold rush, and I'm out here in California. And so during the gold rush, there would be prospectors who would want to test the purity of gold. And so they had what's called an acid test, which they would pour acid over the metal. And if it dissolved, the metal dissolves, it's not real gold. And if it doesn't dissolve, it's real gold. So now we have this term called the acid test, which is come to define any sort of quick and easy way to find the truth about something, or the veracity or the, effectiveness of something. And so in the army, I was, seeing a bunch of these soldiers out in the field, and they were, you know, all dirty with, their weapons and their gear and, out in the middle of nowhere. And I had to really quickly assess whether I could help this patient or not. Because if I couldn't help this patient, if this was a really serious thing, I had to send them back to the rear where they could get more levels of intervention. And if I could help them, then I needed to help them there, and I need to help them now. Because after all, this is the military. We can't just be like, oh, you twisted your knee, go rest. These soldiers have to fight. And so we got to get these guys back in the fight. So in, and just kind of aside here, in the healthcare field, we have these what we call special tests. So the textbook I co-authored is all about special tests. Basically, we have these little tests that we can do in the clinic where we can pretty accurately diagnose things. For example, like, there's what's called the Lockman's test, where you can kind of pull on someone's knee and figure out whether they have a torn ACL ligament or not. And they found that someone who's good at doing these type of tests can have just as an accurate diagnosis as an MRI.
Hmm.
So what I came up with was this acid test of basically taking this concept of these special tests that we use in the clinics, um, and combining it with, the need of being in the army and being able to quickly assess someone's issue. And it came up with the acid test for knee pain, which I call the knee bend and lift test. So essentially what it is I realized that if a person could bend their knees past 90 degrees, straighten it almost all the way, and lift their heel up from the ground at least 6 inches, they have all their muscles and, soft tissue and joints intact. So their joints intact, so I can help them, and I can help them pretty quickly. So that's what the acid test for knee pain is.
Very, very interesting. And it sounds like you apply that in your practice now and continue to do that. Your promo for this stuff reads that results can be achieved through a three-step system that delivers fast and effective knee pain relief. Three steps don't sound all that bad to me, but we're gonna have some listeners who go, man, I've heard people tell me I only need to do three things or five things or 10 things or two things so that I can achieve some end goal. How do you restore our listeners' confidence when they hear, look at, we're talking knee pain, and all you got to do is these three steps? What do you say to them?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I've seen a lot of knee pain, and I've seen knee pain where the patients are like, "Hey, my doctor, they told me there's nothing else that can be done. There's no way I can improve." And or I've seen patients who are like in their 90s. Even, my oldest patient's 104 years old, the oldest one I've
Wow.
seen. And what I just realized over time is that, in most cases, there is something that can be done. There's some improvement that can be made. You don't have to be suffering that much. But only if we can figure out what we can do that your body needs. And and so the three steps I came up with knee pain happens to be the three things that most people in our modern society uh, are missing from their daily routine. So the first step I have is to restore alignment. And if you think about it, most people these days we got a very low diversity of movement, right? And so there's a lot of muscles that we're not using anymore, and these muscles happen to be important in keeping our knees in alignment. For example, we overuse our quadricep muscles on the front of our thigh. Every time we walk, run, go up and down stairs, and jump, we have to use that muscle. But we never really get to use the hamstring muscles on the back of the thigh as much. And so those muscles tend to be underdeveloped and causing a misalignment. And now a lot of people have knee pain on the front of their knee, behind the kneecap or a little below the kneecap, because the quadricep muscles on the front of the thigh, they're just overworked and overused.
Hmm.
And so now if we start developing, rebalance the hamstring there, we start working the hamstring in a very specific way, a very targeted way. Now we could kind of create a opposing pull that creates less tension on the knee. And so that's step one is, and there's a few different muscles that we have to address. But, when we look at, like, there's over 500 muscles in the body. And really for knee pain, you really need to, for this issue here, for realignment, you really only need to look at like 3 or 4 different muscles. These are the most common ones. And then the second step is, once you've done that, then we have to start restoring normal strength in your anti-gravity muscles. So our anti-gravity muscles are our quadriceps, our calves, and our glutes. And some people will be like, well, didn't you just say that the quadriceps, they're pulling too hard? Well, yes. But what I'm talking about right now is that, for most people, there's side-to-side strength differences. And so, like I said, if you're like in the ninth grade and you twisted your ankle, you might be surprised to find that even 30, 40 years later, that all the muscles on that side that you twisted is weaker than the opposite leg. And a lot of people don't even realize that because they never really tested it. See, we're habitual animals. So when we move, we tend to have habits of movement. Like, for example, if go up and down the stairs, next time just watch which leg do you always step up with, right? That's your dominant leg.
Right.
And so your non-dominant leg gets weaker over time. And that weakness, that gap between the two sides gets bigger and bigger. And that's when we start having problems. So now we have to restore, strength in the anti-gravity muscles. And then once you've done that, then the third step is to release excess tension. So anytime you have a muscle that's overused, and it could be overused because you're literally putting too much weight on it, like my soldiers used to do when they have to carry 90-pound packs and run 12 miles up and down hills. Or they can be overused because the muscles are weak and now your daily activities are too much for the muscles to handle. And what happens when these muscles are overused is that they start to spasm as a protective mechanism. This is where the brain and the mind starts to come into play because it's scared. It doesn't want you to get hurt, so it tries to protect you by spasming and guarding. Kind of like when someone scares you, you're frightened, so you kind of tense up your shoulders. It's the same thing. And over time, if that happens for too long, if it happens repeatedly, then that muscle stays tense. And now you have to make a conscious effort to start to release the tension. So those are the 3 steps. And they tend to work pretty immediately for most people. So what I tell people is that, with my patients is I want to notice a change, a small change, a temporary change today, right now. Because if we could find whatever, an intervention, something that I could give you to do that can create a small temporary change right now, we know we can make a bigger change.
It's a beautiful answer that you just gave us. It's a beautiful answer because when I asked you, how do you restore their confidence that these 3 steps are a real deal when we compare it to other things that folks might have skepticism over, and you answered it with knowledge, you answered it with experience, and you answered it with trust. And those are the elements that I think the listeners have to zone in on to understand what you just told them at that high level of those 3 steps. As you exhumed a whole bunch of "I care about you" in your expression and in your answer. So thank you for that. And you beat me to it because I was going to say, Dr. Sue, can you give us some insights on the 3 steps? So you did that, and you gave us the insight into the 3 steps at the same time. Um, you mentioned you've mentioned about restoring comfort, curing pain, right? Restore comfort and cure pain in the book. And do you transition from pain management to curing what some may deem to be a chronic matter? And I think I know the answer to this, but if you can just validate it for me.
Yeah. So if I'm hearing you correctly here, and please,
Yeah.
direct me in the right direction if I'm misstepping here, not understanding you correctly. There's a lot of reasons why someone can be having pain, especially chronic pain. And really, the definition of chronic pain is pain that lasts longer than, there's an arbitrary cutoff, and people give you different cutoffs, like, 3 months, 6 months.
Right.
But really, what chronic pain is pain that lasts longer than it should, meaning there's a healing period that the body goes through if you're having an injury, or after surgery or injury. And after that period of time, if you're still having pain, then the healthcare community will call that chronic pain. And I think the hard thing right now is that if we accept that, hey, I just have chronic pain, meaning it's always going to be there, and that's what most people think when they have chronic pain, then you stop searching for the solution to that pain. And what I find is that, there are definitely cases where there's something going on with the brain, right? There's like, some lesion in the brain, something that's not working right, like a tumor or something, or injury to the part of the brain, like the thalamus, that will cause pain that's not there. People who get amputated, right? They have phantom limb pain.
Yeah.
Um, Basically the limb's not there, but they're feeling pain in that limb. So there's a lot of, the brain plays a big role in pain. But I think in most cases, and I would say most cases, as in 90+% of cases, the pain is only chronic because we haven't figured out in the healthcare community how to address it correctly. And if we can address it correctly, if we could give the right solution, that the pain should change, and it should change pretty quickly.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And for defining the chronic and giving us that insight. You also said earlier, look, when I do these things, I know that if I do them consistently, my knee will be okay, right?
Yes.
There's an application of an element of you're going to continue to work on this. And if you do the things that you know are going to make it better, it's going to be better. And so in that sense, it's chronic because it's there, but we also have the solution to chronic. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, yeah. No, that's a great point, and that's really insightful for you to bring that up. You're absolutely right. Like, I think the idea that most people have is like, when am I going to be done with this type of stuff? Right? It's
Yeah.
like never, right?
Right.
Like, when do we have to like, do you brush your teeth for 10 years? Be like, okay, now I'll never get cavities again because I brushed my teeth for 10 years. No, no, we have to keep brushing our teeth, and it's the same thing with the human body. It's like the laws of thermodynamics, right? Things will keep getting more and more disorganized, and we have to put conscious effort. We have to put work into organizing things, just like our bedrooms will always get messy unless we work to organize, and it's the same thing with our bodies. So no, and you cannot ever stop doing this stuff. What
Yeah.
in the beginning you have to do it daily, even multiple times a day. But what I found out over time with my knee pain is that I just nowadays I only need to work on these things once a week for like 15 minutes, you know,
Yeah.
and that's really, for knee pain specifically, like, 4 or 5 minutes. But I'm talking like, just the whole body maintenance.
Yeah. Yeah.
It takes me about 15. And as long as I do that once a week, then I don't have pain. And it's because when I stop doing it, all these habits of movement start to, affect me, and, just like affects everyone else. And we need to start readjusting, you know, these, we need to start counteracting these things.
What a great example, brushing your teeth. Fantastic example. No, it's true, right? And we if we just apply that, we know we've got to do that 3 times a day for so many minutes, and we get a certain result. And so our body maintenance, we know, look, if I do this for 6 minutes, I'm going to get this result, and that's what you're telling us. Um, we've talked about the field, we talked about the application of the steps, but the medical field itself, you kick off your book by bringing forth the idea of the possibility of healthcare collusion. Your title reads, "What the $12 trillion global healthcare industry doesn't want you to know about your knee pain." Is that true? And how does the healthcare industry benefit at this point from knee pain solutions?
Yeah, I don't know, if most people have realized it, but our healthcare system is kind of broken. And it's very interesting because I just was reading a report last week that showed that in the US, we spend way more money than every country in the world, but yet we have quite a low, healthcare outcome.
Mm.
We're definitely not the nation, that has the, highest, highest longevity, right? And in fact, when they looked at different countries and when they compared like what's the healthcare spending versus longevity, we spend twice as much as countries that have like, 6 or 7 years over us in longevity. So we're doing something wrong here.
Mm.
And healthcare these days is a business. And what happens is that, I think a lot of decisions are made at the upper levels that that is more for profit than for good outcomes. And so I think, I don't think there are people out there. I mean, of course there's bad actors. I don't think, the clinicians sitting there thinking, oh man, I'm gonna, do these unnecessary procedures. But rather I think their hands are tied, right? Oh, they only are allowed to do this many procedures, or they know that insurance is definitely not going to cover that, or, provide this or that. And so their decisions are based on pretty much what insurance will approve and not approve.
The industry is bigger than the individual.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. It's interesting, and I'm not going to get into comparisons about our healthcare system versus the one in Canada versus the United States, and I have relatives in the United States as well, and friends, and it certainly is different. I just thought it was intriguing, anytime you hear that and you think, is there some element of collusion? Have you, in your experience, is knee pain on like, are we, is the trajectory moving in a higher direction? Like, are we experiencing more knee pain today than we did 10, 20, 50, 100 years ago?
You know, I think so. I can't
Yeah.
give you a definite, I don't have data to back it up, but I would say there are a few things that are happening, trends that would make knee pain more
Yeah.
prevalent. And to give you one example, it was very interesting in the army. I was noticing that a lot of these kids that were coming in, 18 years old, 19 years old, they could not do a 12-mile forced march. One of the standards in the military is you got to put on a 30, 40-pound pack and pretty much, you know, walk 12 miles in 3 hours or less. And there were people, these young kids out there who grew up playing video games and thought, wow, the military is cool. Let me join the military. And then now they can't even complete a 12-mile march without stress fractures. Basically their bodies just weren't used to that type of movement, that type of intensity of movement. And, and I remember, because I'm in my mid 40s now, and I enlisted in the Marine Corps as soon as I turned 18. And, at that time, that just wasn't something that I saw. People would join the military and they could throw on a pack and go without having to train up for it. And nowadays, part of what I did in the army was I had to take all these folks that weren't able to do it and basically prepare them to be able to do it. And it was a tough task because they just didn't have a history of childhood history of movement, right? If you think about how kids grew up like 20, 30, 40 years ago, they were out running around, they were riding their bikes, they were, doing all sorts of physical activity, and that's just not happening anymore.
Must have been
It's,
a wake-up call for some of them.
oh yeah, it was definitely. Um, And so yeah, that's one thing that's happening. The second thing that's happening is that I think we're just becoming more sedentary in general, not just the young kids, but even as adults, right? Like, we're shifting into more of a service economy, right? Before it was more labor based, and now it's more service based, and so people are spending more time sitting and and so that's also an issue. And then finally, people are generally getting older and living longer because of modern medicine. And so now these issues become, more prevalent. We're becoming more top heavy as a, society in, I think, in Canada also, right?
Yeah.
In Western worlds where, we're becoming more top heavy, where there's more older adults. And so I think all these issues combined uh, is creating more pain issues in general.
You made me think of something. It might be unfair to ask you because I don't know if you've had any time to consider this, but you made me think as we are an aging society and there's all these different elements creeping in. Artificial intelligence has been a hot topic. Do you think they're talking about robots, helping humans and um, do you see a place for artificial intelligence in healthcare and in things like this, where it could augment any assistance?
Yeah, I think so. I think, I think there's definitely quite a few startups these days who are looking at using AI for diagnosing health issues. But I think the challenge right now is that, when it comes to pain, you know, the AI is only as good as the knowledge that you feed it.
Right.
And so if they were to base it off of our current research that's out there for musculoskeletal issues, um, I think they could be marginally more effective, but it's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be a significant difference, just because um, my challenge right now is mostly, is the research even accurate, right? There's a lot of research out there that's getting retracted now, right? And people are, to graduate from programs, you're forced to publish research, and so now you have this requirement, and people aren't doing research for the sake of research, because they love research, because it's a checkbox they have to make, and so the quality of research out there, a lot of it's not very good at all.
Yeah, it's true. And those are good points. And we know, right now some of the models are just absorbing the research that's out there. I'm sure there'll be some kind of an evolution. Look, Dr. Sue, I know that I probably challenged you a lot in this conversation on raising the confidence of our listeners. And I want to point this out that you have this on your site as well. You say if you suffer from knee pain, you have the power to overcome it or at least reduce it so substantially that your life dramatically improves without medication. Something you've said throughout our conversation. This is true regardless of the origin, intensity, or duration of your knee pain. It's true regardless of your age or fitness level. That's a bold claim, but you also say it's a claim that I feel confident making based on the remarkable transformations that I've observed in thousands of patients over the years, as well as my personal journey to overcome my own severe knee injury. Those are all things that you touched on in our conversation today. And as I said, it's all bold, but certainly your patients must have found trust in what you say and do, given the multiple books that you've now been a part of and published. Do you engage with customers or readers of your book? What does that engagement look like in terms of some of the longer term relationships, Dr. Sue?
I do get emails, and in my books, I always provide my contact information in case they have any questions. I think it's just really important because I'm putting stuff out there, and I don't know how it's landing with people. I don't know if there's some things that are confusing, or inspiring, or and I want to know if they feel like it's important enough for them to put in my email and ask me a question. I answer pretty much all these emails. Um, and and yeah, so I'm sorry, what was your question?
It's okay. What I'm hearing what I thought was you're giving accountability to your material, to your book. The words that you put on the website, the things that you said today, you're making yourself accessible. Are you making yourself accessible to your patients and to customers who buy the book? Are you interacting with them? Are you accepting their feedback? And I think that's what I heard. Yes, I am. I'm here. I'm accountable to the things that I'm writing, and I want to hear from my patients and my customers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's the most important thing. And because, you just kind of iterate and continuously improve. And if you look at my three different books from the 6 Minute Fitness at 60 Plus, that was my first book. And I got some really good feedback from it, and I got some not so good feedback from it. And so my next book, 6 Minute Core Strength, I made changes based on that feedback. And each time I realized, hey, oh, here's how I could make this better. Here's how I could you know, provide more value. Here's how I can get the person to, trust the process more. Because at the end of the day, someone's going to pick up the book and they're going to be like, who the heck is this? And why should I care? And all I want to do is help them fix their pain. And, and if they don't trust me, if they don't feel like my material is worth like diving into, then
Yeah.
I failed as an author. So I want to build as much trust as possible.
And you just threw a whole bunch of authenticity on top of everything else you've given us. Where is the best place for everyone to pick up your new book, 6 Minute Knee Pain Cure? What format's available? Of course, any of your other books as well.
Yes. So my website is 6minutefitness.com. You'll find my books up there. The books are available in hard copy and in ebook format. So yeah, it's out there. Check it out.
Awesome. We'll put those links in there. Dr. Sue, thank you so much for tolerating my questions today and for all the information that you've given us. Is there anything else that you'd like to leave us with before you're going to sign off, I guess?
Well, I just want to thank you for throwing those questions at me. I really appreciate that. I love being challenged like that. I'm having a great time on your show, and thank you very much.
Thank you. That is Dr. Jonathan Sue, a former U.S. Army officer in charge of injury prevention, rehabilitation, and performance optimization, now focused as a physical therapist, yoga therapist, and fitness coach who's put together a series of self-help books focused on your health. This chat specifically talked about overcoming knee pain and doing it in 6 minutes. I'll have all the links to Dr. Sue's show in the show notes. Thank you again, Dr. Sue, and I look forward to seeing some follow-up in the future. Take care.
Thank you.